Hello everyone and welcome to the last game we'll be showing from round 2 of this year's FIDE Candidates Tournament, Fabiano Caruana versus Nijat Abasov, and some of you were saying that why am I showing every game except the Fabi game? Is it that I have something personal against Fabi? Do I hate him? No, it was just that it was 4 a.m. and I had to go to sleep, so now that I'm up and well rested, I'm of course delivering the final game. And Fabi, of course, the favorite to win any Candidates Tournament, but although he did win that one time when he faced Magnus in 2018 in London, it is Jan Nepomniachtchi who won the previous two installments of the FIDE Candidates Tournament. And here, his opponent, sort of an underdog, but also a potential dark horse, Nijat Abasov, seconded by Azerbaijan's number one, Shahriar Mamedyarov. He qualified by finishing in the top three in the Chess World Cup of 2023. Not really in the top three, he finished fourth. Magnus Carlsen also qualified for the FIDE Candidates Tournament, but Magnus said that he will not play, and that's how Nijat qualified for this event. So he definitely has a lot to prove. As you can see, he's much lower rated, 154 points, even more, 170 points to Fabi, 26-32. I'm guessing he is the lowest player ever to enter the Candidates Tournament. Maybe not ever, but you know, in the last 20 years, let's say. But yeah, definitely nothing to lose and everything to gain. Let's see what he prepared for Fabi. In round one, he held Jan Nepomniachtchi to a draw, so he is not here to give anyone any free points. Okay, Fabi with the white pieces opens with pawn to e4. We have pawn to c5. The Sicilian defense is on the board. Knight f3, knight to c6, and here pawn to b4 by Fabi. I'm only joking. Bishop to b5. The Nimzovich-Rossolimo attack, and pawn to e5. Now, we have this position so many times in our games that I feel you guys already know why it's not okay to capture the pawn, but just in case there are new players watching this, if you capture and then grab the e5 pawn, you allow black to just go queen to d4, attack the pawn and the knight, and once the knight moves back, you lose the central pawn, and now you also have to trade queens, and the black is now just better. He does have the bishop pair, it's an open position, and in an open position, the two bishops will most often have a slight edge over the knight and bishop combo. So okay, here we have just castles. It's a very well-known position, bishop to d6, and now c3 is the top played move here, but we have d3 by Fabi, knight to f6, and now knight to c3. We have castles, and here pawn to h3. There is one game that was played last year between Florian Eugen and Vyacheslav Ikonikov, where pawn to a4 was played, and that game ended in a draw. But here h3 is a new move. So already, as of move 7, we have a completely new game. There are some games that have reached this position and beyond in online games, for example, in the Elite Chess database, but those are between lower-rated players and not very relevant to discussing theory here. So we're gonna consider h3 a new move. And okay, pawn to a6, going after the bishop. Bishop captures, d captures, and now knight to h4. So of course Fabi wants to put the knight on f5, block this bishop, and put pressure on the g7 pawn, on the e7 square, on the bishop here, and says, okay, you have to give up your bishop for the knight, and then Fabi will just have a very nice position. And also he wants to get his queen into the game. He might play bishop to g5 to pin the knight, so this is sort of the short-term plan. Rook to e8, and now queen to f3 and the g6, stopping knight to f5, but you do weaken your knight a little bit. So here bishop to g5, threatening to win material, and bishop to e7. And this even favors black a little bit. Now you're just going to move the knight, you're going to offer a piece trade, and, well, trading pieces definitely favors black here. So queen to e3, with the idea of if bishop captures, you're just going to win the c5 pawn. So knight to h5, offering a trade of bishops. And here, this knight to h5 move was sort of the first real thing of the game. I'm not including the clocks here on the interface, but whenever there's anything important, I will mention it. Here, the clock is not relevant to the game. But knight to h5, the first move that actually where some time was spent thinking, some 13 minutes. And okay, bishop captures, we have queen captures, knight back to f3, and pawn to b6. And now comes Fabi's first move of the game, and by first move I mean first move where he actually spent some time thinking, and that is pawn to a3. Fabi invested 13 minutes in this move. And now the situation on the clock is an hour and 20 minutes, pretty much both. Nijat a few minutes up on the clock. And okay, pawn to b5. He grabs more space on the queen side. We have knight to e2. Knight to e2, not with the idea of bringing the knight to g3. That would just be weird. But what Fabio wants to do is move the knight back and then execute pawn to f4. He wants to open up the f file for the rook, maybe double up, rook f2, rook a to f1, or maybe rook f3, rook a to f1, and create some sort of a kingside attack. So pawn to f6, a move that definitely needs to be considered here. Whether it's best to play it right now, or do you first want to improve, let's say a knight to g7, or do you first bring the rook into the game, or do you first move the queen, let's say to d6 to allow the doubling of the rook. So many of these moves are possible, but pawn to f6 right away is what Nijat goes for. We have knight, or you could also consider a move like bishop to e6, and this does look like a good square for the bishop. It's just that you can't do it right away as the e5 pawn would hang. So pawn to f6, knight to d2. Fabi just continues with his plan. He wants to execute f4 and double up rooks on the f file. Bishop to e6, and now pawn to f4. And you will capture this at some point. You might capture it now, or you will wait for Fabi to double up on the f file, and then you're going to have to capture. So here Nijat captures right away. He goes for the knight capture. Knight captures on f4, e captures, and rook captures on f4. You could also capture with the queen, but Fabi wants to double up rooks as quickly as possible, and while keeping the tension on the c5 pawn. So rook a to d8, now with some ideas of maybe executing c4 at some point. If the queen moves, maybe the knight could be vulnerable. All in all, c4 is definitely a move that Nijat has to keep in mind. And now queen back to f2. Fabi spent some 15 minutes on this move. Of course, the move everyone plays, even you and your uncle, is rook a to f1, and it is the top move recommended by the engine, but you have to be a 2800 player to figure out a different kind of move in this position, and that is queen to f2. So Fabi maintaining the pressure on c5 while preparing to triple up on the f file, and he doesn't feel like giving or maybe losing time with queen to f2 is irrelevant to the position. So okay, rook to f8, as of course the f6 pawn will become very weak soon. Rook to f1, and now king to g7, just defending the f6 pawn 3 times as it's attacked 3 times. And now pawn to b4 by Fabi. Now he's asking the question whether Nijat is prepared to go pawn to c4, and probably pawn to c4 is the best move, but he maybe wanted to avoid pawn to d4, but even this is good for black because you can play pawn to c3. Now kick away the knight and win the c4 square for your bishop, and then kick away that rook from f1. So it's not out of the question to play something like this. Although after knight to b1, for example, and bishop coming to c4, the c3 pawn will be lost. But it is a double pawn. Maybe it's a worthy sacrifice for the activation of the light square bishop like this. But okay, he decides to capture on b4 instead, and we have a captures, and now rook to a8, just preparing to push pawn to a5. And if this works, it's great. If it doesn't, then he's gonna have problems. And Fabi says, all right, still no time to rush. King to h1. Now, our good friend the engine wants us to play knight to f3 here with some very unclear ideas. He wants to go to knight f3, knight to d4 to put pressure on c6, and then when the bishop comes to d7, still, just allow the capture on a5 to happen, just a5 captures, and that this will sort of be an improvement on white's position. But I'm guessing this is one of those positions where the engine is just rambling. Fabi goes king to h1, and now pawn to a5. He does not consider this a problem. B captures on a5, and now comes the really interesting moment of the game. Nijat does not play rook captures on a5, rather he plays pawn to c5, and this is this is a very brave, very impressive, but also just weird. Why not just capture the a5 pawn? For example, you capture it, and that's it. Even if we throw in some top moves recommended by the engine, for example, pawn to e5, you can block the position, pawn to f5, and if knight to e4, where of course you cannot capture as the rook would hang, you don't care. The knight really doesn't have all that much to do here. You will play pawn to b4, attack the pawn here, and if knight goes to d6, Okay, you can play something like this. The knight will just, the king can just move. You don't want to capture on e5 with the rook and allow the sort of this skewer with queen to d4 or the pin, however you want to call it. But yeah, king to g8 and the game continues. It's still very complicated, but it can be done. He decides against it for whatever reason and plays pawn to c5. And now Fabi says, all right, I will just defend my passed pawn on a5. I definitely like that. Rook to a6, Nijat says, but not for long. I will double up rooks here and then win it anyway, so it doesn't matter. Pawn to e5, going after the f6 pawn, pawn to f5, and now pawn to c4. Very, very important move, because if you advance the pawn to b4, then the knight comes to b3, and you can never reach that knight, and the a5 pawn is defended forever by the knight. It's on a dark square, and black only has a light square bishop, so that pawn will remain there forever. So he tries b captures on c4, d captures on c4, and now rook f to a8, but now just knight to b3. The rook defends the c4 pawn, so it's not a problem, and the knight controls the a5 pawn. So Fabi is just up a pawn. If he can do something with it, that's going to be great. Plus, the c5 pawn is now hanging. So what do you play here? Pawn to g5, attacking the rook. The absolute best move by Nijat, showing that he's not, again, not here, even though he's much lower rated than everyone else, he's not here to give away free points. Queen to g3, pinning the g5 pawn, and now pawn to h6. Here, this was an opportunity to throw in a rook to b8. Rook to b8 simply with the idea of rook captures on b3, and then of course if the queen moves, you're gonna capture the rook here. And what happens if knight captures on c5, trying to deflect the queen from the defense of the g5 pawn, is that you just do it. And after queen captures on g5, king to h8, queen to f6 check, king to g8, and now rook to f3. Seems like you're getting checkmated with rook to g3. There's pawn to f4. But yeah, if you want to play against Fabi, you have to play like an engine, because Fabi definitely is playing like an engine. And there's not much more you can do here. Of course, the game continues. Let's say like queen captures on f4, rook to f8. You're gonna give a check. King moves, queen to g5 threatens checkmate. The black stops checkmate, and it's very much a playable position. I mean, okay, those are 3 passed pawns, but you are up a bishop, so make do. So queen to g3, pawn to h6 by Nijat, and now we have rook to f2. This is there are of course other moves to be considered, and you don't have to move the rook as the g pawn is pinned, but rook to f2 is sort of setting a trap, and not just any trap. I really think this is a sort of a 2800 trap, as Nijat is down to 9 minutes on the clock. Fabi also 8 minutes and 50 seconds on the clock, and he has to make a decision here. What is Fabi doing with rook to f2? Isn't there just bishop captures on c4, and then after rook captures on f5, you take the knight, and then after queen captures knight, you just take the free pawn on a5? Isn't this just winning? Well, Nijat definitely thought that it is. Bishop captures on c4 was played. Fabi played rook captures on f5, and now Fabi thought that, okay, definitely queen to e6 is what Nijat will play, because after queen to e6, we have a complete mess, something that Fabi also mentioned in an interview after the game. Point being that now there's a double attack on the knight, and the rook here is hanging. And if you move the rook to defend the knight, okay, the game continues. Let's say queen d5, you're going to move the rook to e1 to push the pawn, the rook blocks the pawn, rook to e6, and the game continues. White is still better, but you are defending. However, after rook captures on f5, Nijat plays bishop captures on b3, which like I said, makes sense. You want to remove the defender of the a5 pawn, just take the pawn, and equal material. What else is there to do? But he missed one very important thing. Fabi played queen captures on b3. He did play rook captures on a5, and now what did he miss? What did Nijat miss here? It's a pretty terrible thing to miss. Feel free to pause the video and win the point for Fabi while I give you a couple of seconds. Those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on finding this unstoppable winning maneuver. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is rook 8 to f1. And all of a sudden, you realize the horror of what you have done. The f7 square cannot be defended. Even if you try something like rook 8 to a7 to grab more control over f7, e6, and there's no stopping rook f7. If you move the king or the queen, doesn't really matter. For example, rook f7 attacks the queen, queen e8 and queen b2 check, you're just getting checkmated. That's all there is to it. So after rook 8 to f1, king to h8 was played right away, but now rook f7, and he was in this position on move 37 that Nijat Abasov resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. The queen has to move, and it doesn't matter where you move the queen. For example, queen d6, just queen b1, and there is no stopping checkmate. It's mate on the next move, unless you play something like really super weird, like queen to d3, but we are not going to discuss such moves. Yeah, you're getting checkmated. And that's pretty much it. So it was a fine game played by Nijat against the only 2800 player of the tournament, Fabiano Caruana, who already won the candidates tournament once and held the Magnus Carlsen to a draw over the course of 12 classical games, only to be defeated in rapid. Yeah, very impressive stuff by Nijat with the black pieces, but he does lose, and Fabi gets the full point, and also very impressive game by Fabi. In the interview, Fabi said that it was a very tough game, and that, yeah, I mean, they were both very low on time. They needed to make a few more moves to reach time control, 5 more moves before Nijat went for this bishop captures on b3 idea. We can even show it one more time. Yeah, he said that bishop captures on c4 surprised him, but then he thought that, okay, queen to e6 is what he wanted to do. But then when he saw bishop captures on b3, then he realized that Nijat just blundered the entire game away. But yeah, you're playing against Fabi. You have to play every move, at least one of the top 5 engine recommendations. Otherwise, you're just gonna get crushed. That's what kind of a player Fabi is. And I haven't shown you a photo of the two of them playing, so sorry about that. This is maybe the 5th move. Fabi preparing to castle. You can see that the rook is mid-air. He already moved the rook over the white king. And yeah, nothing weird about the photo. If you notice anything weird, I always say, do mention it in the comments. I just love it when people spot weird stuff in the photos. What I did notice is that Fabi has 3 buttons buttoned on his right hand sleeve, which is sort of sending out a secret message that Nepo will not be winning the candidates tournament for the 3rd time in a row. Rather, it will be Fabi himself. So he thought that we're not going to pick up on that, but of course we have. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Here are the pairings for the 3rd round. It's going to be really awesome. Nijat Abasov will face Hikaru Nakamura. So far, they've played 1 game. Hikaru won. Obviously, Nijat is the underdog, but Nijat is the underdog in all the games. Alireza will be facing Fabiano Caruana. Fabiano, the huge favorite here, 5-1. In their head-to-head score with 6 draws. Gukesh will be facing Yanni Pomnishi. Interestingly, Gukesh has a positive score against Nepo, one of the few people that have made this possible. Even Magnus had a negative score against Nepo for a very, very long time. But yeah, 1 win and 1 draw, and Vidit will face Pragnananda, the 3rd in a row Indian matchup with 3 wins each and 1 draw. And after that, no more Indians playing each other until the 2nd part of the candidates tournament. But yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it and that you're enjoying the coverage so far. Very, very much looking forward to round 3. I would like to thank Andreas Rosenthal, David Gasparian, Henry Hunt, Max, and Tom for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. But for the moment, I will be covering mostly the candidates. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. See you soon in round 3.